Good, a little bit too early. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are still at the Agile Austria conference in Graz, and our next talk is by our wonderful Paul Lister from England talking about the Scrum DNA. We have 45 minutes and we have to be very strict with our time budget. So if you have any questions, we will do a question and answer session at the end. Please, when you have a question, either type it in your Zoom thingy when you're visiting online, or just raise your hands and I give you then this microphone and we can ask your questions and get your cool answers.
Jobs are good.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, man.
Hello. You all right? I'm going to apologise immediately. I've got a really bad cold, so I'm going to sweat and I'm going to cough, but I'm going to try and stay away. So straight away, that's what's going to happen. So Scrum DNA, visualise your path to improvement. What have we got? Scrum Masters in the room? That one, a few Scrum Masters. So what's the biggest responsibility or accountability for a Scrum Master? Anybody want to volunteer? Yeah? Helping the team to create value. I always think that's the second one. Yeah. Smooth out processes. Yeah. So if you look at the Scrum Guide, they're all right. I was a Scrum Master for 6 years, so they're all correct answers. Doing Scrum as per the Scrum Guide, highest accountability. Making the team effective, which is kind of what you guys were saying, second. Yeah. But how does the Scrum Master help a team in both those instances? How do they help them to do Scrum as per the Scrum Guide and make a team effective? The first one's hard enough, especially depending on the organisations you've got. The second one is a work in progress. It's always a work in progress for any of you guys that are Scrum Masters out there. I was a Scrum Master for a long time. That was my motivation for coming up with something like this. But I'm going to ask you another question. Who are you? Don't all shout at once. If I ask you who you are, what's the sort of answer you're going to give me? Your name? I know your name's safe already. I know you. Yeah, it's an open-ended question. Let's talk about my favourite subject. Who am I? A question I ask myself every morning when I get up. But this is a simple contextual answer. I'm going to give you an answer now, but it's based on the fact that I'm talking to a group of Agile people. So it's a simple contextual answer. So I have a scientific background. I was a physicist, which is ironic considering I'm going to be talking about DNA. I became a software developer. I became a very bad manager in a waterfall system. Oh, I was a draconian, horrible manager. But we went through, so I know the dark side. We went through a Agile transformation. We're lucky enough to have actual trainers, actual coaches from the Scrum Alliance, on the Scrum Alliance CST. I was a Scrum Master for 6 years, and then with a sort of an overlap, I was an Agile coach. There's an argument that Scrum Masters are Agile coaches, but I'm not going to get into that. There's other bits of me, though. That sounds a strange sentence now I've said it. Other ways of describing me. So one is nature, one's a simple description. It's a DNA. Bits of DNA encoding my proteins, my enzymes, describing my physiology, my physicality. That's a simple description. But it doesn't really tell you who I am. If you were going to describe somebody, you wouldn't get out a strip of DNA. So he's got blue eyes. He walks a little bit funny. This is all me, by the way, not you guys. There's also nurture. There's the things that I've actually learned to become. In agility, very popular word, empiricism. Learning by experience. Pardon me, sorry people at home. Learning by experience, the things that make me up psychologically. So there's these two different things. A physiological explanation, the structure, the rules of what I am, and the much more complex nurture, the much more complex what I've become. So what we want to do is apply that to teams. We don't just want a description of what skills they're good at, or how many people in the team, or what they're working on. We want the rules. We need the rules. And in Scrum, we have some rules. But we also want that nurture part as well. We want to understand what the team is, what they're doing, how they're learning, how they're gaining experience. He's worried me about the time now. I keep looking at that clock. So let's take a brief detour just for a second. So we're thinking about nature and nurture. We're thinking about teams. But how do most teams operate? Well, it doesn't really matter whether you're making something or you're a service, or even if you're doing the washing up. I hope that translates, washing up. There's 3 different stages. There's an initiation stage where you're thinking about the thing you want to do. There's the creation stage where you do the thing you want to do, keeping it simple. Simplicity is one of the Agile principles, my friends, in case you've forgotten. And validating, checking that the thing you made is the thing that you want to do, or the service you undertook was the service that was required. So let's keep them there. It's a little detour, but we're going to come back to it very quickly. As you can fit anything you made. Things like software development cycle fit inside these things, if you're a software fan. Let's think about Scrum though. So there is a kind of a timeline, but there's elements to Scrum. There's high-level elements to Scrum. My good friend there already mentioned the word value, I think. That is all over agility in Scrum. So can we break down things like frameworks, ways of working, anything into different elements? Well, yeah, we can. We can break them down into simplistic elements. You can have 20 elements. You can have 2 elements. I picked 3. Value, outcome, not output. You guys are all familiar with that, otherwise you wouldn't be here. People. It's very hard to do something without people, although the rise of AI seems to be denying that particular fact at the moment. But people. And time, in particular change. Yeah, these are inherent within Scrum. So if you're doing a different framework, maybe these things would be different. If it was Kanban, maybe it would be flow instead of value. Maybe you'd have flow and value. You could pick a lot of different elements. I picked these 3 different elements. So let's take the first one. Let's take value. So understanding value, what I want to do is have the rules, have the structure, but I also want to understand the experience. I want to understand the nurture, the nature and the nurture. Our nature, when it comes to understanding value, I'll take a step back. So I picked big concepts for each of these things. So the first concept I'm picking is understanding. Value, understanding, big concept. So, like I said, structure, experience, process type. So got the structure, got the experience, and we're going to think about our time, go back to our timeline. So picking one thing to do with value in Scrum. Writing product backlog items. It's in there. Everyone does it. They do it in different flavors. They mostly do it wrong. They mostly write components or specs, but that's for another day. So I go to a team and I say, what question do you ask yourself about that? What question, how do you understand that? What do you do? What is your question about how you successfully do that? And they say, well, simple question is, how skilled are we at writing clear product backlog items that are an independent piece of value? That's what they picked. Jobs are good 'un. That's not going to translate jobs are good 'un, is it? It's very English, sorry about that. And which phase does that lie in? Well, it lies in the initiation phase. So that's just understanding. And I picked 2 other concepts, and these concepts are very similar to the timeline ideas for value. We'll see how they differ for people. So I generate more understanding value rules, prioritizing product backlog items. That should be ordering from the Scrum Guide. Breaking down product backlog items, estimating product backlog items. And similarly, I ask the teams questions. I ask them to generate the questions. Why do you think it's important that they generate the questions? Yeah, yeah. Metrics are a great thing and a terrible thing. And metrics are questions for the most part. A lot of the time is, how much of something have I done? They're not great metrics. Great metrics help you to improve. If you utilize metrics that aren't generated by teams, they don't believe in them. They game them, or they ignore them, or they're utilized, they do use them and then they're utilized to put pressure on teams. I did tell you I was a bad manager. It's exactly what we used to do. So I generate a set of understanding value, the big concept within value, generate a set of rules from the Scrum Guide. The teams then generate their set of questions. And then we think about, where does it lie within the process, our timeline? Well, all of those are initiation. We do something similar with creating value, another big concept, creating. It is linked to the timeline, but we do the same thing. Deciding on and describing the increment, planning how to build the increment, build the increments in priority order. That's almost never done. Just spread people across a sprint and different things. And again, asking those questions. But you can start to see how the process is changing now. The first question, yes, do we create a clear, understandable sprint goal that explains the increment we produce? Yeah, that's initiation. I know it's inside sprint planning. I know it's inside the sprint, but you're not making anything yet. That's an argument I could have with myself. In sprint planning, do we have day-to-day plan on how to construct the elements? Well, that's more about creation, because you know you're going to be checking that plan. You do, of course, do a day-to-day plan within sprint planning, don't you? And building increments in priority order. So similarly with validating, I'm not going to go through the whole board, but similarly with validating, look at the Scrum Guide, look at the rules, generate the questions with the team. Hello, can I help you at all? Generate the questions with the team, and then understand which part of the process it comes from. Okay, so let's switch to people. So with value, it was kind of tied to the timeline. The big concepts were very similar to the timeline ideas. With people are more complex, surprisingly, than a timeline. You know, my friend. So our big concepts here are much different to the understanding, creating, and validating. The big concepts, I just picked arbitrarily as a Scrum Master. You could pick other things. There's lots of different things people can be. Acting together. So thinking about the rules, how do Scrum say people should act together? Well, increments built by the whole team make decisions together. I just picked those. You could pick 40 of those things if you want to. You could grab them out of the Scrum Guide. And then similarly, questions. Do all team members have the skills to undertake any task involved in building an increment? They're generating those questions. They're hard questions. We will see later how they generate questions and then they can't answer them and then they get upset at me. That's Scrum Master 101, though, for anybody who's ever been a Scrum Master. Well, it's all agile rubbish anyway, isn't it? So acting together, acting for Scrum. Yeah, Scrum's a very strange thing. It's called the Scrum Guide. And then can anyone tell me what it says at the end of the Scrum Guide? That means it's not a guide. When was the last time you read your Scrum Guide? 2020. It says you have to do everything within this guide. You can add to it, but you better not take away from it. It's not very guidey. Don't tell Ken Schwaber I said that, for course. So acting for Scrum, yeah. Are they doing Scrum? Remember at the start I said, apologies. Remember at the start I said that, I've forgotten what I said because I'm full of flu medicine. The hardest accountability and the main accountability for a Scrum Master is to make sure Scrum's done as per the Scrum Guide. That's hard. That's hard, especially with organisations who just say to a team, you know, you were just a normal development team last week, Scrum team this week. Suddenly you've got this horrible, cynical barrier to get hold of. That's hard. So acting for Scrum, things like team only works on the increment. How many teams are there that are 50% the Scrum team, 50% all the other work that has to be bled in from the organisation? It's not the way it should be. And team make sure its work is transparent to all openness. I said earlier, I was a software developer. I used to be one of those software developers because I come from the academic background. I'd love to sit in the corner and do my own work and not talk to anybody and just let me finish it. That's not Scrum. Scrum wants you to be transparent. It has a value of openness. So questions generated on things like acting Scrum. Is a single increment worked on by the entire team until it's done? Again, the number of times I go into different companies and the Scrum teams are basically just project managed. We've got 5 people, we've got 5 product backlog items, stick them one on each one. Do you know what happens when that happens? I know you know what happens. They get to 90% on all 5. Team make sure its work is transparent to all openness. So does the team have a level of transparency in place that the team, the stakeholders and anyone else can view their progress at any level at any time? Thank you, ladies. Yeah, so these are all good questions because sometimes they think they have. There's no one from that Jira stall out there, is there? There's no one from Atlassian in here. Uh-oh. Yeah, sometimes they think they do. Sometimes they think they've got this lovely Jira board set up. Sweating so much, this has come off. Lovely Jira board set up. The to-do in progress, done. It's not transparency. You can't check in the middle of a sprint where you are for a start. You know at the start, because you've just done sprint planning. You know at the end, because you probably haven't finished some stuff, or you have finished stuff. In the middle, it's not great transparency. Sorry, Atlassian people, if you're in there. They don't like me. I'm a Miro person. So, acting together, acting for Scrum, acting to improve. There are big concepts when it comes to people. And we can see here, we're starting to get some variance in the timeline. Yeah, we've got some creation stuff, and the rest of it looks like validation stuff. But we're generating questions based on these different timeline ideas, the elements and the concepts. At the end of this, I will go back through this method in a summary. So I know, because I know this is a lot. You can't read that from here. So similarly with change, our third element. The third element I picked, like I say, it can be arbitrary, this stuff. Anyone can pick any element. But what do I fear as a Scrum Master to do with change? Well, mitigating change. Yeah, not do anything anti-agile, not do anything anti-lean. Don't create huge amounts of documentation. And responding to change. But we've nearly finished that, Paul. Do we have to make changes to it? Yes, that's what the stakeholder wants. It's about value. So they're the big concepts I picked for change. And Scrum has loads of rules about mitigating change. But I just picked little bits of it. Sprint planning. In sprint planning, do we restrict the work to what is required as part of the product goal? Very similar to a previous thing about people. Definition of done, as part of the team's definition of done, is user testing done as well as automated testing? Again, they could generate 20 questions to do with definition of done, but these are just examples. And responding. So retrospectives, when retro actions are generated, are they addressed in the next sprint? That was this particular team generated those. Do you know why they generated that question? They never dealt with retro actions. You know what they did? They stuck them at the top of the board. And more and more and more retrospectives appeared. Retrospectives are one of my bugbears. I used to split them down. This is sort of an aside. I used to split them down into three things: individual, team, and organization. Because especially with fresh teams, everything's everybody else's fault. It's very rare that they look at anything apart from, my laptop's not quick enough. That build keeps broken. The other team keeps integrating stuff without telling. It's always somebody else's fault. What you want from retrospectives really is, the reason I say individual, team, and organization, it's really what you can control. If it's an individual, you can control change. So really trying to sort of attack that in retrospectives and try and like slowly build up the confidence within teams for them to say, yeah, I was crap last week. I actually got distracted by loads of stuff. How do I deal with that? So it's about control retrospectives. Anyway, I wandered off a little bit there. I have got a lot of flu medicine in me. So we've looked at three elements. We've looked at value, people, and change. We've thought of big concepts with regards to these elements, and we've thought about what that means in Scrum, and the teams have generated questions. And we've attached to those questions where we think it lies in that very broad timeline idea. That timeline. So now we've got all these questions. So we just extract them from each of those elements. We don't think about too hard what those elements are, but if they were labeled as ideation, we put them under ideation. If they were labeled under creation, you can tell this was a software development team because there's loads of creation ones. Put them under creation, and you can tell that the product owner was barely with the team because there's hardly any validation ones. I had a lot of problems with those teams. We put them under validation. So we generated a number of questions. So I've somewhat manipulated this at the time so that there was 20 questions. I did it, I made it 20 questions because it's easy to multiply up to 100, and we see why that's relevant or irrelevant. I'm somewhat dichotomous on that. So, how do we answer those questions? There's lots of Scrum health checks. There's been loads hanging around for ages. The problem with Scrum health checks is they do something like this. I'm also doing something like this, so bear with me. They have a RAG status. They say things like, are we good at sprint planning? Yeah, green, we're good at it. We always finish it. Doesn't help. What you want to do is generate the questions and get the answers done in such a way that it's about improvement. It's not about how good you are at it, even though some of the wording says that there. So you've got 0 to 5. Let me take a step back. Even I've done it. I hate numbers. The reason there's numbers even on there is because at the time, I had to justify this to another layer of management above the teams. Do you know what they like? How good are they at that? 72%. That sounds good. Another quick diversification. I've got time. The reason I fell away from numbers very quickly is I was helping some product owners with value, measuring product backlog items, measuring what the value of them was. And a manager said to me, we don't need you, Paul. And I said, well, you can pay me, but you don't have to need me. I said, no, we've got a good value system. And I said, what is your value system? So we've got 100 questions for each product backlog item or increment. I'm not even going to go into why that's a waste. We answer all those questions. It tells us how much value it is. It gives us a score out of 100. I said, that's interesting. Can I take a guess as to why I've been brought in? And they said, yeah. They said, is it because everything sits at about 60, 70%? I went, yeah. Yeah, because you don't know, because those questions are so broad, there's so many of them. You don't really know what that means. Is it important tactically? Is it important strategically? Is it important to the stakeholder? Is it important for improvement? You just end up with this grey area score. You were going to yawn now. I could see it on your face, dude. You can yawn if you want. So these questions, and we've got this lovely color code, a kind of bastardized RAG status, an extended RAG status. We're still keeping it friendly. I do use things like that because other people in other parts of organizations like RAG statuses, but we'll see why it's relevant to Scrum DNA. So we don't do this dark red. Also, I'm colorblind. I don't help myself, but we don't do this. Slightly lighter red. It's something we need help with, i.e. they struggle with it. Are we familiar with the Tuckman model? Yeah, some of you guys, the forming, norming, storming, performing, that sort of thing. Yeah. It's kind of akin to that. Not quite, it doesn't quite map onto it, but it's similar. The ever popular orange, we do this just because it's part of Scrum. I work with a lot of very bitter teams that, we've got to do another daily Scrum, have we? Every day. Start getting into yellow. Some are good at this, or amber. Some are good at this, but not everyone on the team is. You always have that in teams. That's more likely. You're going to have people very excited by it. You're going to have die-hard developers, stroke product owners who are more in the orange. For everyone on the team is good at this, but there's still room for improvement. We're starting to move into the norming and performing stages. And green, that's the dream. We could teach other teams how to do this. And we see why that's a good thing, especially if you're working within scaled Scrum. I had an hour for this talk, yeah? Lock the doors. Okay, so they answer the questions, and they've got this lovely color coding. Let's try to forget the numbers. They're there. If you're a big fan of numbers, you can have it. If you were working with a single team, I haven't really got a problem with the numbers. It still doesn't really mean anything, though. So what we can do now is we can take that color coding for each of those questions. Remember, those questions are divided up into the different timeline. So we'll have a series of questions that are answered, different color coding for ideation, creation, validation. So we can map out their Scrum DNA. We can have a lovely DNA strip that goes across those three pieces of the timeline. And visually, you can see exactly where a team is. Team that doesn't do Scrum. Oh dear. But there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. If you had a brand new team and they didn't have a clue and you ran this exercise, this is probably what you're going to get. You're going to get this, I don't know what's going on. The team that doesn't exist. I mean, I've never seen it, and I've run this for a while. But what you're more likely to get is something like this. There's an obvious question that someone's going to ask me in a minute, and I'm going to wait. So you can see here, I've got some different colors sort of moving down the scale a little bit in the ideation. They're pretty good at making stuff. Validations, again, a bit sketchy, back and forth. So a decent Scrum Master would look at that and go, well, yeah, they probably haven't really understood the requirements and the value that stakeholder needs. And then when you're validating it, that's exactly what's happening. They're reflected on that value and say, but making stuff, the output's great. You're just not making the right stuff. So you can start using that. You can start looking at that. You can bring it into retrospectives and say, okay, let's have a look. What's this mean? What's this mean? What's the obvious question about that strip? Come on, come on. What's that? That's not on my status strip. I asked them about that. They said, well, one of our questions was how to write user stories. Are we good at it? And I said, yeah, that's a valid question, using user stories for product battle diagrams. They said, yeah, we just did it because that's what we thought you wanted to hear. because you're an agile person. We don't know what user stories are. At least they were honest enough to signal it in some shape or form. So that once you've got this Scrum DNA with an individual team, it's great. You can attack it. If you generate the sets of questions over scaled teams, you can start to see the value of green. Because if you've got 10 teams working on a single product line, and one of them's not very good at this bit, and one of them says they can teach the others in this bit, whatever your version of multi-team sprint planning, I'm not saying PI planning, I'm not a safe person, I'm a less person. You can start talking about, is there room for that team to help that team with these ideas? Crossing over, educating, improving. So it's really useful for scaling. The difficulty there is generating the questions. But there will be common ground in those questions. But I've done it. I was working with 14 teams for a client that shall not be named, over 38 workflows. And we realized one team was absolutely great integrating and stuff like that, and one team didn't know what they were doing. We made space and that problem went away. Say it went away, that's the sort of thing Scrum Masters say. Managers, it didn't go away, it came back again. Complacency is a terrible thing in Scrum and Agility. Okay, so that's the central model. Benefits. A metric that focuses on how we are doing something, not what we've built. Even good metrics are about outcome. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But there's still how much of something have we done? There's still, are we good because we're great cogs in the machine? That doesn't help people to improve. But you can still use them. If you want to run your JIRA reports, you can still do that and use this in combination with it. It's not a problem. Enables the start of a conversation, can be used in retrospectives, yeah. And it's even better, once the team start to get used to it, they start actually arguing these questions. They start arguing with each other. You want that discourse. I know conflict's not great, but it's better than the team all just nodding its head in a retrospective and looking at their watches. And like I said, if used with multiple teams, then teams with strong areas may be able to help teams with weaker areas. It worked really well when we were, I nearly said the name of the company, when we were doing that. They didn't like it because it felt like, aren't you wasting time in a sprint where you're not building product? Our invincible overlords will not like that. But once they saw that teams could do anything, in quotation marks, they're more than happy. So let's whip through the summary of the prep, because I know there's a lot there. Think about the elements involved in Scrum, or whatever framework you're using. I arbitrarily chose them. I thought they were big things. You may choose different things. Break the elements into the big concepts. Like I said, I had understanding, value, validating, creating. That's kind of like the timeline. But then with people, I had acting together and something else I've forgotten. And change, respond, mitigate. So big concepts within those elements. This is kind of root cause analysis, really, in a really backward sort of way. List the items from the Scrum structure relating to these big concepts. So this is Scrum in particular. How do they relate to those big concepts? Generate questions for the team relating to the items. Don't generate questions. Don't listen to past Paul Lister. Work with the team and let them generate the questions. Past Paul Lister's an idiot. Anything else on there? And then then divide those questions into the different timeline items. So that's the prep. Then the actual work. Get the Scrum team to answer the question. There's a lot of get. I must have been in a bad mood with the Scrum team. There's a lot of like authority to this, isn't there? Help for something at the Scrum team. Use the color matrix to record the answers. Build a Scrum DNA. Identify areas of improvement and create concrete actions. Concrete actions. Anyone who's been a Scrum Master knows how vaporous actions can be if you're not careful. Okay. Yeah, nice. I know. People taking pictures. So a little coder, in theory, this methodology, this DNA methodology, you could apply it to anything because the system is just have a timeline, break down into big elements, break down into rules, ask questions about those, answer them with color coding. So I did it with a group of CEOs and CTOs who hated me. I had to pretend I was a workflow coach because somebody told me if I said agile, they'd just sack me a meeting. So I did a similar thing. I kept the original elements. And then we were talking about management. We weren't talking about Scrum. So the big concepts I decided this time, working with them, effectiveness, leadership, adaptability, list items from there relating to these concepts. That's a bit more difficult. The Scrum Guide's lovely because it's a set of rules. Management's a bit more vaporous. But I come up with a set of aligning management goals of organizational purpose for effectiveness. And the questions were, are objectives linked to purpose? Under effectiveness, focus on outcomes. Are decisions outcome driven? You can see how I'm sneaking agility in there. What's this outcome? Is it the same as output? Yeah. Sort of. With people, leadership. So again, building trust, communication, empowerment was the kind of the rules I was putting in. And it was, do we model psychological safety and accountability? Blah, 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 blah. You can see how you could apply this to, like I said earlier, the washing up if you really wanted to. It feels anti-agile doing all this for the washing up, but you could apply it to anything once you've got that methodology of what are the big things, what are the big elements, what are the concepts, what questions can you ask about those, and where do they fit on a simple construction timeline? Okay, questions. Unsurprisingly, Safe would like to answer a question. This guy.
Thank you. Paul, thank
mate.
you very much. That was beautiful. Actually, I love the idea of having a DNA which reflects or gives a value for your team. Is it a Scrum? Is it not Scrum? This is beautiful. But my first question is, all these questions that you mentioned, does it or do it include also the outside factors of the team?
It's up to the team to decide. If the focus is improvement.
Okay.
So if the questions asked means that in some shape or form they can drive improvement to be a more effective Scrum team, great.
But there are some factors that are forbidden actually. So they are outside, and they are
Yeah, well, I think the question still should be asked, and I think that should be read because you can't do anything about it. Okay. But then it's the Scrum Master parachuting in and working out why you can't do anything about it. It's the organisational impediment, I think it sounds like.
Okay.
Which just means you have to cowboy up as a Scrum Master and go,
okay,
what are you doing?
And do you think that after we have this beautiful colored line, we start fixing, of course. We have this so that we can start fixing this. So can we also reflect this or go up a little bit and show them, okay, guys, these are the things and we need you to contribute a little bit with us?
When you say up a little bit, are you still talking about the Scrum team or?
No, outside.
Outside, yeah. Yeah, because of the place that I utilised this and that we looked at it as a team was very much within retrospectives.
Mm-hmm.
So it would naturally, well, why aren't we very good at writing concise product backlog items was one of the questions. Mm-hmm. And the answer was because we've got a client-facing team who use product backlog items to write long-winded instructional manuals.
Right.
So they want the work done from them early. Mm-hmm. So then it was exactly that. Hello, stand by your beds. It was exactly that. It was the fact that, okay, that's a interdepartmental impediment. how do we get together? And then it was me coaching. I had to coach for client managers. Just, have I got time? Yeah. So just a little thing I did was basically, it made me paranoid. Well, what I did basically was, the first thing I went is said, so show me the documentation. I said, yeah. Show me the file directory. Yeah. Then let's look at how many times people have ever looked at this. It was like 1% 2 years ago. It was a habit they got into of generating something because it was a protocol. No one was using it. So basically, yes, is the answer to your question. But it's one of those good Scrum Master things, one of those good causing the removal of impediment things, where they can venture up the ladder and go, well, let's show me what you do. It sounds great what you do, guys. It's affected us. Yeah, that's what you do. And then go, and you're doing it wrong.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Good question, mate. Any other questions? Oh, two at once, like it's like buses. You thought it was going to be you then, didn't you, dude?
Yeah. I was just thinking about the DNA also. So wouldn't it, in my experience, if I would present this bottom DNA to some higher ups, and let's say the PO part is always red, wouldn't they just think, well, we get rid of the PO? So, do you know what I mean?
What you're saying is I've built a lovely axe to chop
Yeah,
down trees,
yeah. Well,
and somebody's using it to kill people.
no, not necessarily to kill, but to get rid of them. So
yeah, I mean,
so that it's
yeah,
just a.
You're right. There is that possibility, but I think it's a dangerous path to go down once you start thinking about that. Because, you know, within agility, I know you guys know, you want to be open, you want to be transparent. As soon as you stop being open and transparent because you're waiting for the guillotine to fall on something, then that's where things can get a little bit anti-agile. So to answer your question, yeah, there is a danger of that. But it's getting them invested in the process as well. It's like anything like Scrum Mastery, where it says, remove barriers between stakeholders and the team. And you think, yeah, great. And then the stakeholders don't care. And then it might take 6 months or a year before the stakeholders keep getting things they don't want before they start going, okay, we'll come over. I think it's the same thing. I agree that's a risk. My personal opinion would be risk it. I think this guy had a question. A good question, mate.
Thank you, Paul. I think this is imperfectly perfect in a way. I was just wondering, because we also I'm working as a Scrum Master for 2 teams, but I'm an Agile coach, so we have 35 teams in general working on distinct products. And we're doing an Agile maturity assessment kind of to be able to see organizational impediments, right?
Gotcha.
Is this something that might be useful for that? And then if so, I could see this being something more effective. How often would you recommend doing it with a team?
That's a really good question. So I think it depends on the change. Also come and talk to me about the other problem. There's business cards there, guys, if you want to tell me. Yeah, you can do it. They're there, dude. We'll get them on the way out. I'm trying to answer. I think it is one of those vaporous scrum. It's like the Scrum Master problem where you know there's a problem in the team. And what you do is, as a good Scrum Master, you don't go, here's the problem. You go, well, how can I try and find ways for them to bring up the problem? And then it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. And then about the 5th retrospective, go, look, you're not doing this. So like that. I think it's like the Tuckman model. I think if they're down here, if they're in the kind of forming, I'd do it every retro. I think it really depends on the team. If you've got a team that's been a Scrum team for a long time, but they've got bad habits, then you probably want to pare it out a little bit. So I can't give you an exact quantitative answer to it, but I think it depends on the maturity of your team in terms of agility. Does that help? Aces. That's a very coachy thing to do, is it? Does that help? Yeah. Any more for any more? Look at that minute ago. Yeah, worried, just lovely. Thank you for your time.
Are there any questions online? No? No, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Paul.
Lovely.
Thank
Cheers,
you, guys.
Okay.